What's up, Gear Mortals? Trey Xavier here. Today, I want to try writing a song in a slightly different way. Normally when I write a song, it's based off maybe a lyrical idea, a chord progression, a melody, or some kind of a guitar part. Today we're going to write a song based around a bass line. We're going to start with this bass line that I've written, and then we're gonna build the song around that. This is kind of a unique way to write a song. I've done it a couple times before, but I feel like it's not all that common, and I think this is gonna be a great way to get a fresh perspective on a way to write a song, so let's see what happens. For our bass sounds today, we're using Toontrack's Easy Bass, and then for drums, I'm gonna be using my favorite Easy Drummer kit, which is the death metal one from Easy Drummer 2. So of course, the first thing that we need is a bass line. Here's what I came up with. And then it repeats. So not a whole lot to it. One thing that I really like about this bass line is that it's pretty tonally ambiguous. And what that means is that it's obviously a minor sound. We have a minor third in there, but I think all of the notes are from the minor pentatonic scale, which means that there's only 5 notes that we're looking at, which means there are 2 notes that are kind of wide open. And I like to do this because it gives us more options in terms of what we can do around the bass line. Specifically, that there isn't a 2nd degree of the scale or a 6th. If you don't know any music theory, it doesn't really matter. It just means that those are notes that are up for grabs basically at this point. So we could have like a flat 2 type of a sound. So here's the root. And in our scale we have, so far we have the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and then flat 7 of the scale. And that means that we could either have a natural 2nd or a flat 2nd in there, as well as a flat 6 or a major 6th. And that gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of the kinds of chords that we can superimpose and imply over this bass line. I didn't really do that on purpose, but it works out in our favor because now we're gonna be able to set up the listener with this sort of ambiguous tonality and then drop in these other notes, and it's gonna be a really nice surprise. We've also given it a little bit of a rhythmic motif, a pattern that comes back enough to be memorable, but not so much that we don't have enough variation throughout the 4 or 8 bar pattern that I've got going on here to keep it interesting in one listen. Anytime there's a loop or something that's gonna repeat, I wanna have it be repetitive enough that it's memorable, but also varied enough that it's not boring. And I think this fits that requirement. So for example, here we set up a little motif. Okay, so it's da 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 da, and you're expecting to hear it again, but then we have this little fill. Okay, and then we hear the pattern again with a slight variation. And then another kind of a fill thing that's slightly different. And then the pattern again, the first half, but then I changed up what happens in the second half, right? It's just skip a note, basically. There's that fill again, but once again, slightly different. And then just something to finish it off. I'm sort of self-aggrandizing a little bit. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Basically just one idea with some variations as we go through. So this is sort of what's called an ostinato. An ostinato is just a compositional tool. You take a little piece of repeating something, and you have it kind of going over, usually like some changing chords or some kind of movement. In classical music, for example, you might have a little flute ostinato, and then the low notes will change underneath it. So actually that's something that a bass will do a lot. I've also seen this done quite a bit in like punk, pop punk. They'll have like a little guitar lead thing that's just a repeating thing over and over again, and then either the bass line will change underneath it or the bass and the chords in the other guitar parts or whatever. So we're gonna kind of be doing that on the bass instead, which I've seen done quite a bit. The most notable band that I've heard doing it on the bass is Tool. So if you want to hear some examples of that, they've got some of that in their catalog. So the next thing that we gotta do is give it some drums. This is the fun part. As you've seen on my random drum groove videos, I will often just grab a groove right out of the MIDI library, from any Easy Drummer or Superior Drummer pack. But today I'm gonna do it the fun way, and I'm gonna play it in because I actually have a pretty specific idea of how I want it to sound, and this will actually be a little bit easier to get exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm gonna be badly playing it in on my brand new Alesis Strike multi-pad that I'm very excited about because I'm a terrible drummer, but I love to do it. And so I've got this awesome pad. And I can play the basic groove in and then tweak the MIDI afterwards. So here we go. All right, so obviously that's not spectacular by any stretch, but it's pretty close to what I want. So now I'm just gonna go in and tweak it and clean it up and make it exactly what I want and make it sound good. So all this together gives us basically an intro and the start of like what could be the first verse. All right, let's add some guitar. Okay, let's try this. So I've just got this cool lo-fi sound going where I'm actually just running my favorite Easy Mix lead tone, which is the Ola Epic lead, into a lo-fi vocal chain from their lo-fi pack. I think that keeps it just low-key enough for this part to sort of be there, but not too in your face, because we're still keeping the focus on that bass. So I did one tricksy little thing in here that I was referencing earlier about implying different tonalities. Up until this point, we haven't decided on a second degree. And I gave us a flat 2, which we don't have to keep, but it's there for now. Until then, the listener has not had that information. And whether or not it's something that you consciously know about when you're listening to it or not doesn't really matter, but we've sort of pulled back the curtain a little bit more to reveal some of the sonic landscape. Earlier I talked about superimposing some chords over this bass line to give it some forward momentum. And so now we're gonna do that. I've pulled up a clean tone. This is from the Indie Rock pack. It's called Ambient Tail. I think that sounds pretty awesome. Let's give that a shot. Just keeps going. So the chords that I've used here, the first two are like these sus2 or like add 9 power chords. So it's just the root, the fifth, and the second. Okay, but this actually changes the tonality from what we had before where we had this flat 2. Because now we've got the regular 9, the natural 9 in there. And then this enormous pain in the ass, which now establishes a 6th where we didn't have one before. Gives us a little bit of a Dorian sound, which I imagine the audience has not been expecting at all. And then continuing that. And then the last note of the bass part actually goes to a different chord, right? So I've given us pretty much just like a major 6 sound. So now I'm gonna add another layer of interest with this sort of counterpoint guitar. It's like a rhythmic counterpoint to what's going on in the bass. So I'm gonna be sort of playing off what the bass is playing and adding a little bit more harmonic interest as well. So that's gonna sound like this. So it's not like really a rhythm or a lead guitar part exactly, but here's what it sounds like if I solo out that guitar and the bass line together. Here's the sort of lead guitar with the chords that we had. So you can hear, even though here and here, the guitar is playing the same thing, the lead guitar, over a different chord, it gives it a completely different context and it sounds different. Right now we've got three very different elements doing three different things. Now, if we wanted to add like a vocal line on top of this, it might have to be pretty simple to avoid being really cluttered. It might have to be this kind of like long, soaring thing with not a whole hell of a lot going on, maybe just really sparse. Or it's possible that we could use this guitar thing that we just came up with as a vocal melody and then have the rhythm guitar be doing something else. I'm just always very cognizant of things being too busy in a song, you know, having too much stuff going on. You can always do that. You can have a lot of very busy elements, especially in sort of a proggy type of thing. You just have to be careful about the way that everything is interacting and working together so it doesn't become a muddy mess. A good way to avoid that, especially with something as active as the bass line we've got, is just to make sure that each thing is rhythmically doing something that sort of fills out what the other ones aren't. So we've got a couple cool parts going on. I'm gonna change up the bass line just a bit to give it a little bit of oomph, a little bit of interest. I'm gonna take this long note and I'm gonna change it. At the end of this bit here. This is pretty effective because now we've heard the bass just going over and over again in the background. We've come to sort of expect it to just come back around the same exact way every time. So when we make a significant change like that, even though it's the same rhythm and everything, we've changed the tonality so much that it's interesting and exciting. We've created a surprise. So the next thing that we're gonna do is the same thing again, okay? That same part's gonna happen, and then we're gonna go to that last long note again, and we're gonna change it for a second time. So the reason that this is such a cool and effective technique is that they've heard the first part, the first version of it over and over again, and then we changed it, and so the listener is like, whoa, we changed the rules. So then the next time it comes around, they're either expecting that it's gonna go back to what it was, or that it would be the new thing, the first change, but the second version, and then we're gonna throw them a third version, and then we're going into the next thing. It's not wildly different by any stretch. It's just this one note, and we're using that to move it forward. That's gonna sound like this. And that will lead us nicely into the next part, but first I gotta record a new guitar part to go with that. And I'm gonna take the same idea and just extend it a tiny bit like this. So up until this point, we've kind of been putting off the big moment. And in my mind, for this kind of a thing, the big moment is when the guitar and the bass finally played the same thing together. And I think it's time to give them that. But first I wanna create a little bit of tension, and I'm gonna do that in two ways. I'm actually gonna drop half of a measure, but I'm also going to change up the tonality a little bit. We're gonna go back and we're gonna bring back that flat 2 that we had before. And what that's gonna do is add a little bit of tension before we hit them hard with everything all at once. It's just gonna be 2 beats, and then we're gonna hit them with the whole thing. So now I feel like once we've done this, we've sort of delivered on the promise that we kind of were making from the beginning when we heard this bass line by itself, that at some point in the song, we would really hit them with it as sort of the main thing with everybody all together playing it, and I think that sounds pretty awesome. There are so many different things that you could do with this. This part could be your chorus, you know, you could sing over this or play your melody on top of this, or it could just be sort of the climax of the song. You could push it even further back in the song and have your kind of verse, chorus, verse, and then hit them with the riff, the big riff as I like to call it. But either way, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this bass line and I'm gonna change just the pitches. I'm gonna keep the rhythm the same, mostly the same, and I'm gonna change the pitches so that it's implying a bunch of different chords, and that's gonna take us somewhere new, but not so unfamiliar that it's wildly different. So I'll show you what that looks like. Same basic contour, same rhythm. I actually didn't change any of the rhythm at all, but it definitely feels like there's a lot more harmonic motion. There's a lot more implied chordal movement, okay? Even before, when we had those chords superimposed over the bass line that wasn't really going anywhere, it didn't feel like it had the same sort of forward thrust because it had this almost like a pedal tone underneath it, something keeping it in the same universe, keeping it locked down to that one general universe. Now we've been able to travel a little bit further. And then to go along with that, I want some heavy guitar parts that don't really follow the bass that much. So now altogether, this kind of chorus and then bridge or post-chorus thing sounds like this. Back into the intro. So this gives us a ton to work with here. We've developed so many different parts without going hog wild and adding completely random stuff. We've developed all of these parts based around the bass line, and we've kept the essence of it throughout the entire song so far. And we've basically got, let's see, we've pretty much got a whole song here. I mean, this is 3 minutes of music. So if we're thinking of this thing that we just added as a post-chorus rather than a bridge, pretty much all we need now is a bridge and then some kind of an outro, or not. I mean, we could just have the chorus happen again, or some variation on the chorus. All right, so in order to get from our last chorus to the bridge, I'm gonna try something a little bit tricksy. Let's see if this works. So for the bridge, once again, I'm gonna keep it pretty close to what we've already got, but just start on a different chord and just a slightly different style, a little bit of a rhythmic variation, and go through some different chords. All right, so here's what I came up with for the bridge. Then using that same lo-fi lead sound that we had before, I came up with this cool kind of ambient lead bit. And then from there, we're led right back into the chorus again. I'm gonna add a nice little bass fill just to put a button on it. All right, so now let's hear how we go from this last post-chorus into the bridge and then into the final chorus, and hear how it all flows together. I think that's a cool way to end it. That puts us at 3.5 minutes for a song, a nice sort of pop song length. Obviously, you can do whatever makes you happy with this. This does not have to be the song format that you use by any stretch of the imagination. This is just something I kind of threw together for the sake of demonstrating what you could do different techniques that you can apply to creating a whole song just from a bass line, and I think it turned out pretty awesome. This is just a real bare bones skeleton of the song. You would add lyrics and vocal melodies, or screaming, or, you know, maybe a guitar solo or lead instrument of some kind. Whatever, the sky's the limit. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to TuneTrack for sponsoring this video. EasyBass is a super incredible tool. I use it all the time. Obviously, it sounds awesome, so I highly suggest that you check it out. Hopefully you learned a couple ideas in this video that you can use to turn your bass lines into complete songs just like we did here today. And as always, if you haven't already, mash that subscribe button, smack the bell to join the notification squad. Drop me a like and leave a comment in the comment section letting me know if you've ever written a song like this from the ground up, starting with the bass. I want to know, and I'll see you real soon.